My game of the day from round 2 of the Tata Steel Tournament 2018 is Anish Giri with white against Vladimir Kramnik. Seems to me that Kramnik was in quite a playful mood today because on the second move he did something a little bit unusual, bishop b4. So a clear sign that he didn't want to go into some very theoretical main line that, well, Giri is very well prepared. So he's tried to sidestep that with bishop b4, a little bit unusual. So queen b3 looks like a reasonable move. White would like to grab those bishops. And now, well, normal moves here would be perhaps c5 to protect the bishop and put a pawn in the center. Knight c6 is also reasonable, guarding the bishop. But Kramnik played very quickly bishop a5, which is a slightly odd move because actually what happens is they arrive at a kind of Nimzo-Indian position where, this is what happened, d4, where this bishop, instead of just remaining on b4, has gone back to a5. So it's almost as though black has sort of lost a tempo there. So knight f6. And Giri decided, well, that's a free pawn, I'll take it. But of course, black can claim back that pawn with a little bit of, well, little bit of effort. And now g3. So although this exact position hasn't been seen before with this slightly odd bishop a5 move, in fact we've transposed back into a kind of g3 queen c2 Nimzo-Indian, and black manages to double those pawns. And now the real problem piece in black's position is the bishop on c8, so black hurries to develop that bishop. Of course, black would very much like to put that bishop on a6 to attack the c-pawn. The problem is after knight d4 there are difficulties on the long diagonal. So in this position, instead of bishop a6, bishop b7. Both sides castle, and rook fd1 looks like a very natural move, looking at that pawn on d7. And here Kramnik played what looks like a very natural move. He played queen e7 to step out of the way of the rook. Looks reasonable. In fact, the best move here is to play knight f6, which looks very strange. There's a lot of pieces going back and forth here, you know, that bishop and the queen as well. Okay, the idea of knight f6 is to free the e4 square for the bishop. So that means, for example, here, after a4, then you can play the bishop to e4, and to prevent a5, then knight b7, and that's quite nice. You know, it could be the chance to attack the pawn on c4 with knight a5, rook c8. I mean, I don't think this position is too bad for white. You know, it looks about equal to me. For example, after the trade and maybe trading bishops, it seems to me that, you know, both sides have slightly weak pawns here, should be roughly level. But look what happens after queen e7. Here Giri plays a4, and now he's got some initiative. Black can't really stop a5. You don't want to play a5 yourself. That'll mean the b6 pawn is too weak. So now Giri has a clear plan. d6 from Kramnik. Kramnik spent 19 minutes over that pawn move, and I think at this point he realized that actually he's lost the initiative and this is not so simple. But Kramnik's next move, I have to say, I really don't like at all. I mean, maybe he should drop this knight back anyway, but he played f5. Now, I mean, this isn't really initiating any kind of kingside attack. This is kind of pseudo aggression, but all I see after f5 are weaknesses in black's position. Weakens the pawn on e6, weakens or exposes the 7th rank. And now in this position, basically, you know, if you look at all these pawns Giri traded on b6, they're all vulnerable. Whereas if you compare white's position, well, beautiful pawns on the king side, and of course that means the king is absolutely safe behind those pawns. Okay, these aren't too pretty, but yeah, I think it balances out as this is really favourable for white, or just in practical terms, it's a difficult position for black to play just because of those pawn weaknesses and potentially the weak king as well. So knight d4 from Giri, good move. So looking at e6, knight comes back. Of course, Kramnik wants to get rid of the bishops. So now he's only got one bishop to deal with. Now Kramnik recapture with the knight. I mean, my computer would like to trade lots of pieces here. And play rook a8. But, well, of course, white is not going to play ball and not going to trade. Probably rook b1, rook d1 as well, but rook b1 looks fine. And I don't think this really changes the assessment of the position. These pawns are all a bit vulnerable, and white's king is still safe. White is better. Knight b7 played anyway. Giri traded and then put his knight on b5, so that starts to attack the d pawn but also opens up this diagonal for the bishop. Now maybe knight d7 is a better move than the game continuation, but still it's a pleasant position for white. Kramnik played rook c8. Seems reasonable, trying to get some counterplay here. But Giri, instead of taking on b6 and trading pawns, he played queen a2, and that's an excellent move. Defending the pawn, but really the idea is to try and penetrate with the queen down the a file, and this is really dangerous. And already you can see, well, we're about to see that the 7th rank is really exposed, and that creates enormous difficulties for black. And now Kramnik lashed out. He played d5, and that is a really loose move. Bishop g5, instead of, well, if white takes, then that brings the knight to a strong square. But bishop g5, excellent move from Giri. So now, of course, he's threatening to trade on f6 and take on d5. So Kramnik has to do something about this pawn. If he takes with the pawn, then queen a7 hits these pieces, and it's a very unpleasant position for black. So rook c4. A check with the queen. King comes up. Still not the best position for the king. You can see that rook now threatening to come down to a7, and that would be absolutely devastating. You can see at the moment that rook can't get back to defend on the 7th rank. So Kramnik had to put the knight in the way. It's not a beautiful square for knight, it has to be said. And queen and the rook don't coordinate very well. Queen b8, excellent move. Looking at the pawn, threatening knight d6, of course. So rook c6. Now knight d4. Giri just has a really nice initiative for the pawn. And now rook takes c3. I mean, rook d6 tries to hold everything together, but knight f3, threatening checkmate in one move with knight e5. I mean, that's incredible in itself. I think that says something here. And, well, if knight c4 trying to shut out the knight, then white takes and rook a8, and you know these pieces are flooding in on the 8th rank. Really nasty. I mean, black can try and block out the queen with queen d8, but, well, you know, white's initiative continues here. you know, this knight is such a poor piece. Lovely position for white. So knight d4 just played, and now Kramnik took on c3. Queen b6. Things are not getting better for black. So now this knight has to move, and white returns to attacking. So now rook a7 threatened with a deadly pin. And Kramnik should probably play rook a3 here, but after rook b1, that rook's still threatening to enter the position. And I think probably black is going to be lost here. You could trade queens and take on e6, but queen c7 is really dangerous. And now just h4, and you know, white's attack continues. Black's big problem: the major pieces don't coordinate well. And look at white's pieces. Every single one of white's pieces in an excellent position. Queen b8 has just been played. In fact, Kramnik blundered now. This ended the game straight away. Bishop takes queen, knight takes queen. Kramnik, unfortunately for him, hasn't escaped to an endgame. Well, not a very favourable endgame, because bishop b4 wins that rook. How very unfortunate. Black's pieces just get in each other's way. And now it's very simple. The rook was taken, and white even breaks through on the 7th rank. And unsurprisingly, Kramnik resigned in this position. Excellent win for Anish Giri, who now leads the tournament with 2 out of 2. He's just had a blistering start. But I think Kramnik will be very, very unhappy with that game. He made, well, inaccuracies and misjudgments throughout that game. And, well, of course, everyone's upset by a loss, but I think particularly the way he played, not good. Looking at the other scores, the other results today, Carlsen defeated Ariban with the black pieces. Very nice. Ariban was just outplayed quite quickly in an endgame, quite an equalish endgame, but Carlsen turned on the heat. Mamedyarov defeated Ho Yifan. Very smooth technical game. The other games were drawn. Garwin Jones did particularly well against Fabiano Caruana, who was under a lot of pressure but managed to hold the game and very nicely in a rook and pawn endgame. Svidler also under pressure against Wei Yi, but he held the draw after 124 moves. Not easy. So there we go. After 2 rounds, Anish Giri leads the tournament with 2 out of 2, and then, well, there's a chasing pack of Anand, Carlsen, Mamedyarov, and 1.5, and, well, early days. Thanks for watching.